Okay, today I'm going to show you how to split and repot North American pitcher plant, Sarracenia. The best time to repot these is now, early spring. It's now late March, unseasonably warm. It's about 90 degrees here in the nursery today. And the best time in the plant's growth cycle to do this is before the new growth comes through, certainly before it's about an inch in height. The leaves or the flowers. As the leaves and flowers are developing, they're really quite brittle, and if you repot them you risk breaking them. No long-term damage, but you'll lose the early leaves and possibly the flowers. So here I've got a Sarracenia minor. This is the giant variety, Sarracenia minor varrochi, and as you can see, it's pushed its pot apart somewhat. It's trying to climb out. It's pretty tightly packed in here. Now this is one of the upright growing Sarracenias. There are 8 species and countless hybrids. You repot them all in exactly the same way. But a couple of the species, Sarracenia purpurea and Sarracenia, grow slightly differently. And although they require the same method of repotting and splitting, they differ in their aftercare. I'll cover that in a minute. So first of all, let's cover this chap, this Sarracenia minor. So this has a similar growth habit to the other species, so Sarracenia alata, flava, leucophylla, minor, aureophylla and rubra. So the first thing we need to do is tip this plant out of its pot. You can see here the plant's pretty tightly packed and the growth points are around the edge of the pot here. So the first thing to do is remove the moss that's grown on the surface. And then loosen the compost. Just loosen around the roots and you'll see the compost drop away. And at this stage, just give it a quick shake, and it's an idea to break the plant in half. There we are. Now we've removed the compost, you can see the individual growth points here. Now each one of these growth points effectively is a separate plant. These plants are a rhizome, like an iris. Now a rhizome is an underground or a surface stem, grows along the surface of the ground, gradually dividing and forking, and that's how these plants divide and clump. In much the same way an iris in a garden would grow and develop, same structure. So, with these individual growth points, we can either snap them off, like so, like that, or if you've got a pair of secateurs, it's an idea to actually cut them through without dropping them. And that way you get a much cleaner break on the rhizome, less likely to have any infection from mould that way. Pull off any dead leaf bases, remove all the dead old material from the base of the plant. And what you're left with, 2 sections of rhizome with a growth point at one end. Now we'll shorten this one slightly because it's quite long. And that's now ready for potting. Now, I mentioned the rhizome grows along the surface of the ground and gradually divides. So obviously you've got the growth point at this end here and the old section of rhizome here. So this plant is growing this way. So when you put it in a pot, you want the end of the rhizome that isn't growing against the edge of the pot. Then the plant will grow into the centre and across the pot that way. If you plant this now with this end, with the growth point towards the edge of the pot, in a season it's going to need repotting again. Simply a case with a 50-50 mix of moss peat and perlite, with a bit of peat in the bottom of the pot. Thread the roots in so they stick down to the bottom of the container. The roots don't just imbibe water, they provide anchorage for the plant, and certainly with some of the Sarracenias they can be pretty tall. If you grow them in deep pots, you'll find that the roots will go right the way down, and you actually end up with slightly taller plants because they're able to stabilise themselves more. So when the roots are in, simply fill around the pot, give it a quick shake, shake the compost through the roots, fill in around the edge, so you end up with a plant looking like that. You've got the end of the rhizome here, the growth point in the middle of the pot, and as I mentioned earlier, this is Sarracenia minor, which tends to bury its rhizome somewhat. So just push it down a little bit and just give it a light covering. Now the depth you would put Sarracenia minor in a pot at varies from plant to plant. Some of the larger forms I grow here in the nursery, their rhizomes will be sometimes 8-10 inches below the surface of the soil, so they go down quite a distance. If you're not sure, just put them fractionally below the soil surface, and they'll find their own depth anyway. They'll grow either downwards or upwards to compensate. Now, use exactly the same method for other Sarracenia species. Here's a Sarracenia flava, which is in desperate need of a repot. This you would do in exactly the same fashion, require a bit more in the way of brute force because of the size of the plant, and of course this one's in a much more advanced state of growth. It's got pitches to about 6 inches on it and a number of flowers through now, so you need to be quite careful when you're repotting a plant like this. Not to say that it's too late, you just need to exercise a bit of caution. So I mentioned at the beginning a couple of the other species, Sarracenia purpurea and Sarracenia. Now these are slightly different in their growth habit. They're lower growing plants to start with, and you tend to find you would repot and break the crowns apart in exactly the same way, but you quite often find that the individual growth points will break off of a plant without any roots. The rhizomes themselves are quite brittle on these two species. When that happens, all you need to do is take the old growth off of the growth point, off of the crown, the same 50-50 moss peat and perlite mix. Make sure that the crown is pushed well into the compost, so it's in contact with the compost, water it well, stand it in rainwater in full sun in the usual fashion, and they root through in a matter of a few weeks.